There's a smile. Hello, beautiful souls, and welcome back to the Alchemist and Oracle, a space where we engage in spiritualized conversations that deepen understanding, inspire transformation, and spark meaningful dialogue about life's most profound truths. I am Nicole of the Oracle, and as always, I'm joined by my amazing co-host, Warrioress Ardeshir RN, the
Howdy,
Alchemist.
everyone.
Welcome
Hello.
to the Alchemist and the Oracle. Today, we're getting into conversation about why we are being called into darkness at this time. So, interesting topic. I actually chose this topic, and we're gonna let the Warrioress share her take, and then I'm gonna share my take in terms of why we're being called into darkness.
Whew. Hey, welcome. I appreciate you being here. Well, we're going to begin, of course, from the alchemical perspective of why we're being called into darkness. And one of the main things for me is that we're being called into darkness so we may grab and come into our light. So in that perspective is about, pretty much just alchemizing where you are, and also more so of loving in on who you are in the dark aspects that we find to be not so good. Some of it is notified. And I remember doing some work way back around, and might get back a little bit on him, on Carl Jung, identifying those parts of us as shadows. And I'll, give some examples. Some people might already know some examples, but I'm going to be tapping off and on from my experience and what I know that maybe you can relate. I don't know who this is for. If this is for you, great. If not, that's cool too. By Debbie Ford, called The Dark Side of the Light Chasers. When I began, and my ego pulled me away from it, but the trace of it is dynamic, and liking the way in which she incorporates the message and even to our life, which is it was just like pow for me.
What's the name of the book
So
again?
it's called The Dark Side of the Light Chasers by Debbie Ford. I even have it on Spotify audio. It's actually read by her, which is really cool. And so I got some little notes here about it, and I might have some efforts I may read from her because I started outlining. I mean, I've outlined like crazy anyway with this book, but her book is really it's really reframed this idea for me. She talks about the part of ourselves that we label as dark, and that we often see these parts are often the parts we were taught not to be. And the anger, the need, the power, grief, the mess. So instead of having those parts disappear, we need to be able to get exiled, to really honor them and to go underground with them. And when they do, they get under us and they start running our lives. Sometimes we don't even realize it. So as I have been doing it, had did a series about the traits of perfectionism, them are some of the things that kind of run us. And there's certain things like, that we do in different aspects of how we run our lives. You have the, different places like the workplace and interpersonal and things and that go on in the workplace. Sometimes you might even experience it. For example, bullying, other type of things, harassment, things of that nature. Then sometimes I have this quote, and oh my goodness, I should have brought it up, but it's an example. If somebody is on the side of a building up here, one of my places where I go, if something to the degree, and I hate to screw it up, that if a man is honest and you don't believe him, then it teaches a man to lie. And I really, really, really might be able to find that later and tie it into here. But one of the things I wanted to say is when I look at what's going on in the world and how if we come into and acknowledge these shadow parts of ourselves and understand that they're not bad, how can we transform them and find what they're trying to tell us and how to get the good? It brings out what we have to do in loving ourselves, for example. So it's kind of, you know, like this. So it's like instead of having these parts disappear, we need to honor them. So even anger. So I talk about anger. Anger is not one thing I like. Sadness is one thing I like, but it's a part of being human. I don't. And then there's fear in there. Lord have mercy. Let's that fear is big time in here. Disgust, I didn't have any problems with. Joy, of course. So the joy comes in and really, in such a way is not a bad, but it ends up kind of masking the other things that we deny to still carry with us when we don't honor them. And sometimes it can build up within you to a circumstance that it ends up being portrayed in the outer world, for example. So when we look at this, you know, kind of symbolic, we have to think it's just like what's going on in the world is calling for us to do the work to transform so we can be the light in the world that we really truly are, that we don't acknowledge. And when there were some examples about being a child and how we intercept things that have been taught about, and I see this still to this day. And so I look at the fact that we have to reparent ourselves sometime, which is also that part of becoming the and honoring the true you. So when it comes to kids, people are trying to tell them to be anything other than the expression that they are. And the tantrums come from this does not feel natural to me. you know, when you're being told some things, especially um, giftedness, art, most kids will find if they don't have any place like writing on the wall, well, yeah, that's not a good thing. So we have to find a place for them to express, what it is that they need. It might be like a big board or a platform or something like this, but we are also, and you have to go back to before of how you got to masking shadow traits of that nature. And it was just one of these things that you see going on when kids defy you in that because there's something going on that doesn't really relate to them in such a way that goes there. And so my whole thing is like when you're looking at, honoring um those traits or the fact that you can get angry and maybe shift it in such a way to honor that anger and to then transmute it into something good, or why was that? And so now an example that just came to me spiritually has to do with my father. And so I really was angry, but I was not expressed to be able to share, why or what. So you just internalize this, and it's not really a good thing. So there's a time where I used to have something that I want to go take a drive, and I would really sit down and find out why. And then you do things as a younger state, and you forget it as you get older. Why? Why was I getting so angry with him? And or no, why they were making me so angry. And so to sit down and kind of figure out what that was and try to woosah it was for me to be able to sit with it and re-transform it so I would be sitting in that energy and find out something good from it. And it had a lot to do with because I was not being heard. Huge, huge. So I wanted to open. So the whole thing is I want to talk about a lot of people are feeling this way of being called in the darkness. And I just want to clarify here that darkness is not a sign that something's wrong with you. To transform this, darkness is where the transformation begins and not where it ends. So this is how you get into, so you're feeling disoriented, stripped back, and you have to confront the part of you that we avoid. I've avoided a lot. I've avoided, didn't even think I had a fear of failure, much less a fear of success, which has to do maintaining when I get there. And why not? Why am I doing? I haven't even got there to know whether or not I can sustain it. So it's about confronting the parts of yourself that we avoid. So it's not failing. It's just entering into the humanity that we seem as young people have been told to dismiss. And so we have to honor that in here so it can eventually connect where my co-host goes into the body. And so in my thing of alchemizing certain things, what it says is that transformation is that area of blocking. It's a stage where the illusions get to dissolve, old identities break down. So you want to get that. So like now for me, it's continue. I'm in a death process of this right now, and I hadn't honored this area, and I'm not area at a certain stage in life. Like now for me, it seems it's like, no, you can no longer stay in those old identity, break down those old energies and how you walked, because they're no longer safe. You cannot continue to move and walk and to not acknowledge the essence of who you are. These structures, people don't talk about it enough. And it's all about being honest with yourself. Because if you're honest with yourself, then you can be that with others. Darkness is what happens in the psyche when things can no longer maintain that false sense of control. And so it just like hit me, woo. And so when we're reframing from the darkness, the truth is exposed, is not collapsed. So to do that, we're not being called into darkness randomly, okay? We are definitely being called to deal with the coping mechanisms that no longer serve us. Poverty without death collapses. The spiritual bypassing stops functioning. So we've talked to this with you, it just stops. And so I can no longer continue to spiritually bypass. And sometimes you don't even know that you're doing it. And not just sitting with that true self is what happens is the soul doesn't punish, it initiates us. So it's painful to go through the process with this. So Debbie Ford, I have a note here that talks about this dark side here. She talks about how the dark is often the parts we were taught to reject, like I was speaking earlier, which is the anger, this, and even being grief. So when my great grandmother passed, because she lived up, and we roomed in the same area, the nice, beautiful finished attic. And when she crossed and went down as we were going out the door to take her to the doctor, there was a set of grief. I didn't know what it was. I just know her gone. I'm crying. She's not here. And so all through the funeral and all that, I did that. And I was told to be quiet, not cry. I'm going to make everybody else cry. But that wasn't a 10-year-old child's business. It just turned 10. She had passed just short of that in May of a year. And so those parts, they don't disappear, they go under. So we have to, go under there. If not, it ferments. And this is where you get to have the part of you that needs to alchemize and shine in that one. So we bring into account that it won't go away, becomes the fate that we have to use. As alchemy has said, to do that same thing symbolically and get it out. Darkness is not our enemy, it's unconsciousness is. Because I said we unconsciously do stuff, so the awareness is where we want to be. So it's just like reclaiming our power and not losing that power. So we don't we don't go into the darkness to suffer. We go into to receive what was lost within us. The power that was locked in shame, no shame about it, wasn't able to express nothing because of the shame. Shame is really, really that feeling. And how do you transform shame, especially when things weren't because of anything that you've done, and change it and find a positive light. And I think because of where I was and even my work and leaving home and how I had to deal with that and transmute it and then serve other people who actually enjoyed how I served them, kind of was the shift for me. But it didn't acknowledge it, so it kind of just stays in your system. And that's something that we want to transmute. Excuse me. So the truth couldn't, survive that way. So it's one of those things that I look at and I was just in this meeting when I told one of the persons, I said, well, I didn't like to get angry, but I was angry the way people drive around me, because it's like, you know, as much as you don't have that kind of control, but then I woosah at the moment and say that I know how to transmute that. It's not about not feeling it. It's that you cannot continue not to feel that part of humanness when behavior, what I would feel, threatens my very existence and that of other people because I care. So, the takeaway here is, if you feel like you're being called to darkness, isn't the detour, it's just the doorway in. It's just that darkness, as always, isn't the absence of light. And it was hard for me to kind of understand what it means to be in the dark or deal with the shadow self. And now I'm more into that, because to become a better version of myself each and every day, to honor those traits, as I call them, like the traits I talked about with perfectionism, fear of failure, disrespecting and having boundaries, these things that we need to set forth. And this is where the gold is actually distracted, because when you're talking about turning lead into gold or turning something into a diamond, you're talking about doing that work, and it's a painful process. It's just like when they talk about the butterfly, the caterpillar changing into the butterfly, and how painful that has to be, become that beautiful, beautiful transmission and cocooning. So this is some other things that me and her were talking about going deepening, which has a lot to do with the blackening, the whitening, the yellowing in different stages to get you to that I think is similar to that. Now I think about similar to that of what a caterpillar goes through to become the butterfly. So I just invite you to honor that and to call that and to sit with that. And we'll find where we'll talk about how to go about that. There's a couple of different things that I wanted to talk about in reference to that, and transmuting that and knowing that it's okay. And I say that because I was not okay with these feelings and shadow and how people made you feel, especially when things certainly wasn't your fault, and why you experience it is to transmute that. And I say that for something, because I don't want to go into triggering right now, because I didn't give the warning in that of things that happened to me and my body, and that, and understanding, and the fact that I'm still here, and how, I've taken that and overcame it, and transmuting, continuing to step back into my highest self, my best self, and continuing to transmute this in this book, and tapping into this subject that we had chose to speak about with you, especially with what's going on in the world now. There's a lot of people feeling some kind of way with everything that's going on, even through the government, through cities. I see a lot of stuff transforming where things are getting cut off, and people are sad, people are fearful, and it's okay to feel that way. It's just about not sitting in it that way, and looking at how you can look at how you need to make a change, and to grab and to see what's out there, even in the midst, if I said, even in the midst of chaos, there's something good to be had. And sometimes we just have to look outside of that box and research it, and then we can find what it is, or what our next steps are. And we might get into that too a little deeper. I hope this was good and helped you understanding that it's okay to sit in the shadow stuff, and why we did it. And it started when we were younger. And still, like I was saying today, it's like, don't do this. Kids, will be kids. And they get to, act up when something doesn't seem right to their natural, and even with us adults, to our natural beingness, to our natural aura of how we walk in the world. We can still be kind, we can still be just, and just transmit and find the love, because it says without love, even though it sure says because hate hurts, because it does. But through that, you can find love and find out that we are so much more connected than any of us really realize when it comes to getting into the darkness, so you can lighten and continue to be yourself, so you don't have to continue, I say suffer because I was suffering, didn't know I was suffering. And it's that point. Now I'm light and continue to get lighter as I go ahead and honor my truth.
Mm.
And continue to be aware of it. The more that you become aware of it, the more that you're able to transmute it and find the goodness in that. So one of the examples I give, and I'll just shoot it over to my co-host real quick, on my perspective, is that there was something that that Debbie Ford had said in her book about when she had went, because we put so much money into going through and still find out that there's still something going on with, or we feel bad about who we are. That's illusions. We are brilliant, loving, and caring people, even in the midst of our shadow selves. So this was something where she was at some event, and one of the ladies who was at the event when she was speaking, and obviously how she was speaking, said she was a bitch. So she was like feeling some kind of way because I had a certain situation. You feel some kind of way about that. And then she's like, well, how does she know I am a bitch? So she said, like, oh, it's like somebody see through you. And so basically she had a problem with why that was. And of course, the instructor's going with, well, why do you feel that way? Because it's not, let me see, how's it? It's because it doesn't feel good and it hurts people and this and that and the other. I get that. So it came down to the fact that she said, well, what is it about being that you can see the good in it? So she made examples as if somebody was building your house, and I know some people build houses from scratch, for example. What if somebody was really, just lollygagging and getting you like 3 weeks behind schedule? Don't you think you'd have to kind of be a bitch to kind of get them to, speedy themselves up? Not in, a really awful, really nasty, but a way is like, get you about the movement. What are you doing? And then even in the workplace, which you can get it in the book and do it, but I kind of got it, and I was like, I never thought there would be a good thing in doing that, but sometimes you have to be that in the world, because some people try to take advantage of the kindness. Because she said that she was this good, kind, and trying to be the best person she was, and I get that. But in it, we still have certain things that we have to put boundaries on. We have to do that. We have to transmute that energy. It's not about that you're not. It's just that what you will tolerate. And so it's about honoring these aspects of ourselves. And sometimes they play a good part in the role, and not to demean them. So that's the transmuteness of it, is to get people on their thingy, because if they're off their game, that kind of delays you, especially when a house 3 weeks off is kind of a lot when it comes to building, not unless you expect it to be building and how it's building, the materials that it built with. They build them a lot faster now than they did before. I prefer the slower route. So because the foundation is important, and anything construction from the foundation up. And I say that because I have issues with water when it comes to basements, by not people doing the right things by them. So with that being said, I'll leave it at that there right now. I just tied it into life's perspective. Hey, transmute it, use it, and understand that those things that we feel and how we are not a bad thing. I continue to do that because I've had a lot of traits that I have pretty much what's the word? I think it begins with an S, or held within. What's the word I want? It ain't coming to me. I hate when that happens, but it is what it is. Suppressed. Begin with an S.
Ask and you shall receive.
All right, darling. Well, you can go ahead and take the reins here.
Okay, so I like your take is called into darkness, I feel like within the mind. And my take is one of being in the body and thus being in the field in the world. Like the reason that okay, real talk here. The reason that I feel we need to have this conversation and how I'm going to approach this being called into the darkness and why so many people are feeling this call, feeling this pull. Some people feel like they have been pushed in the darkness. There's so much going on in the world that we are in at this point in time. And, you know, we're coming out of this 9-year cycle, which is one of endings and one of looking at things from both sides of things. So I am very comfortable in the dark. I have a completely different take of what the dark is and darkness and things of that nature. I'm very comfortable there because that's where I feel that we are meant to reside in. And as I go about kind of breaking down this stream of consciousness that came forth, I think you'll understand why I say that. And hopefully I articulate it in that way. And so when we look at like called into darkness, like darkness means the total or near total absence of light. And I think it's interesting when you look up darkness, there's this contradiction in the definition, total or near total absence of light. So it's like, okay, what is it? That's a contradiction, right? So therefore darkness is contradictory in even how they define it. So let's put a pin in that. So we have been called into darkness because we have been ignoring it and avoiding it. We have been focused on the light only. And even this is cloaked in artificial light. Okay. And we have been focusing on this artificial light. We have been distracted by this artificiality. And that is of man-made wars, famous people, celebrities, hustle culture, do more, be more like this fake in the light expression. So there's a lot of things that are this fake light, this artificial light, I'll say that. So we have been called to dark into the darkness in order to find our way again and to see what has been covered in that artificial light and why. Turning the page here as quietly as possible. That's for the podcast side of things. So we are in a cycle of one that calls us into the deepest areas of darkness. Systems, and that means the systems and the structures and the people. We see how these systems, we are seeing how these systems we were told were created to keep us safe. Don't care about that. They don't care about that safety. We see how, or we're seeing how these systems have been responsible for the structures being held up only to keep us locked away from our trueness. We see how, or we're seeing how, and more importantly, who is holding up these structures through the systems they create and engage in. So we are in the dark to see who these people stand with, perverse in the truth of caring about compassionate decision making. So we're called into the dark. We've been called into the dark because the true workers of light understand that is where we are meant to exist, in the darkness, to call out, to illuminate the inversion away from the sacredness of our divine essence. And this is and has always been the spiritual war we have been in, the spiritual warfare that plays out in the darkness. That's where it is. That's where the war is, in the darkness. So those people that you look to, idolize, feel inspired by, hear me when I say this. I want to be very clear in what I say moving forward here. We're being called into the darkness. You need to go into the darkness and see if you see them there. Let's pause into that. You need to go into the darkness of every single person that you look to, idolize, feel inspired by. You follow them blindly or whatever, right? Even if you don't follow them blindly, you need to go into the darkness to see if you see them there. This is why. Because if you don't, that means they are not in their light. And they are in the artificial light that is within the false reality of the world. So you should be able to find them in the dark, because that means that they are aligned with the divine essence, God, creator, universe, whatever you want to put a name to it, that is luminous in the expression of love. So we have been called into darkness because that is where the real world plays out, where the real world resides. And it can be overwhelming to present yourself there. One of being truthful, and being in your light is the healing remembrance that provides a shift in the frequency within the darkness, because that is where the real world resides. So there's no need to be scared of the darkness when you are the light within the dark. And there also may be some scary things there. And that is why so many of us are here, to not leave the dark cloaked, and to not leave the dark cloaked room when the screaming starts, when you turn the light on in that room. Goes back to that, to the book, The Way of Mastery. Is one of my favorite parts in the book. I'm always reminded of, is like, you don't get to leave the room when the screaming starts. You don't get to leave the room as a light worker, someone that aligns with God, that is this luminous essence and expression of God. You don't get to leave the room when the screaming starts, because you showed up into the room that was dark and you were the one that turned the light on, and things are starting to scream. That's what's going on right now. That's literally what's going on right now. And when you look at the word light, light means something that makes vision possible. So we're being called into this darkness to look and see who else is standing illuminated within that darkness. So that's when I said you need to go into the darkness and see if you see them there. All those people that you are inspired by, all those people, because you need to have the clearest vision of, are they standing in real true light or the artificial light that is outside of the darkness? So we're being called into this darkness as light workers, or those who align with God, because that is where the warfare is happening. They're doing things within the dark. We're coming out of this 9-year cycle of seeing, like, you have like the e-files, as they call them, with, the G and the free guy. And people are starting to see people's names on the list. There's like a name on the list of someone who is in the spiritual realm of things. And not to say that they're connected in the way of doing some of those really, oh my gosh, I don't even have a word for it, really disturbing things. But my point is, this is all happening because we're in this cycle right now. We're in the cycle of of coming out of a 9 year, which is, as I define it, as a tower moment. Things, structures, systems, and people are coming down. They're coming down because we have more and more people that have awakened to their light, and they are starting to recognize, oh, I have this light within. They're starting to go into the darkness. They're starting to realize, oh, there's nothing to be afraid of being in the dark, because the dark is what needs me. And this narrative of, oh, the darkness is bad, the darkness is scary. Why is that narrative pushed? Like, honestly, why are certain narratives pushed around darkness? Darkness and light, they exist. One is not bad, one is not good. They both serve a purpose. We need the darkness in order to rest from the illumination from the sun. We need that time for our body to quiet, to sit still, to recalibrate, just as much as we need the light. And with that, that also means that we need the light within ourselves to be activated, not just when the sun is out, not just in these artificial enlightened or lit spaces. So that's why I say you need to go into the darkness and see if you see the other people there, because there are some people that I have seen in the darkness and I'm like, okay, I can trust that you are aligned with God. Or whatever you want to put a terminology around that. So we're being called into the darkness at this time because that's where we have always meant to be. And we have, for whatever reason, well, I know the reason, we've been told to avoid that, because when we tap into our light and our essence, we become empowered. We realize that these systems and structures and these people, we don't need them. We don't need them. We don't need them to control us, because they want to control us to keep us from tapping into our light comfortably, to be comfortable going into the dark and shining the light within the darkness and showing, oh, look what they're doing over there. Or like, oh, they're not, I don't see them here. Why are they hiding? Why are they not here? Why can we not see them in the dark if they're this luminous, aligned with God people, person, place, or thing?
Yeah.
So we're called into the darkness again because that is where we're meant to be. And I'm speaking from the body standpoint. And I think it's important to balance our human and our beingness in such a way that we become comfortable with being uncomfortable. Because as I said in the last episode, Pima Children, she says really beautifully that we as humans, we have a problem with, we don't like to be we don't like to be uncomfortable. We have a discomfort activation mode. And these people who are not in the light are fully aware of that. And they keep pushing and pushing and pushing and activating that. Let's make them uncomfortable. But when you can realize that through the discomfort that you experience, how you can alchemize it, as the alchemist says, use it to empower you forward. Use it in a way like she was talking about where the lady was called a bitch. How can you use that energy, that activation in a way to empower you to not be afraid of your own self, to not be afraid of your own light? So I'll leave it there. I know that's a lot. But again, go into the darkness and see if you see them there. I'm going to keep, that's going to be the theme of my life for until the day that I die.
Man. Yeah. Thanks for sharing it from that perspective. That was great. I mean, I look at in the book and here in the book in the introduction, I'll show the page, but we'll definitely put it in for those listening, but for those who can see it, this is it. The dark side of the lightsabers. For those YouTube.
What's the subtitle underneath it?
It says reclaiming your power, creativity, brilliance, and dreams.
Mm.
That part. um yeah, I was looking at the beginning of this book, and this is my bad when this really hit me of how we didn't realize how it talked about for me about the suffering for many years to be a better person. This is exactly sounds like this speaking to me or my life, wanting to walk tall, believe in self, and having the courage to ask what you want and need it, and to live a life that matters. That's what most of us want. We know that we have to honor some of these places in ourselves and utilize them and understand how they met. You know, this book I think is a great one to do this, and it's so down to earth and can't relate with that. She talks about, addiction, things of that nature. And maybe all of us don't have that, but it's not that. It's the message and what it's portraying. She talks about this ache inside me that I could bear until the day I met my real self, my whole self, my authentic self. And that's where, they're trying to, transmute to, you that part.
What are you have some as we kind of close out this episode, do you have any ways from your standpoint in how to I guess work in the way that the book kind of shares how to work with touching into the darkness in that way?
Yeah, let me see. She's got if not, we can put it in the chat. I mean, in the
Or
thing
it may
after we're
not be from
done.
the book. Do you have like any suggestions? Like if someone was to listen to that, like what is the call to action or how to work in and kind of lean into the shadow aspects in that way?
Well, the call to action is to honor it first and foremost. So I'll say how in talking to you and what happened yesterday and how I shifted because there's things that I've tried to be so perfect at doing. I'm a great driver, but then crap happens, like in a parking lot. And feel when you feel this certain kind of way of this perfectionism and this and that makes you feel some kind of way when a little something happens and things just happen. It's just that I have no way to feel any kind of way because I'm kind of prepared to deal with however, those things happen. And so I had to look at it and going through this and referring it, it just had me realize that I just had to go from a place of love. So I've been doing a little bit of drilled in silence to the Giannis thing, and it's about I had to come and say love is holding me. I relax, and I have to let it go because I had to let go of what I already had transmuted, even though it felt awful to had back then just really lightly, and it wasn't much, but it was just the idea that it happened. And sometimes we get so upset with ourselves in these little things. So it took a while, but I had to sit in the parking lot once I got to where I needed to be and had to leave a note and sit once I got on the outskirts because it's somewhere I needed to be because I couldn't find them. And kind of sit with that it was okay, and just to honor that particular happened, and that I am not perfect. I think I'm one of the best drivers in the world, and I really am. But crap happens, especially when you can't see something or do that, especially backing up, which is one of those things I'm very good at. It just was one of those, but it's real life because you're going real slow. And so I think it's the sit with it. I also like writing it out, or I found out just speaking it out. Just speaking it out is another one for those on writing. Saying out, getting it out. Knowing is okay. Get it out your system. let that energy kind of go after you have acknowledged that I felt this way, but you are not what you did. You are not what you've done. You are not that. And there's nothing bad about it or negative about it. So I had to call it out. I had to honor it. And I had to look at some energies that I still am trying to release of how I portray it, what it means to be who I am and to be, what is it called? There's another term, but I use perfectly flawed, being perfect, you know. So that's kind of what I did real recently, and called it out. I haven't journaled it, but I'm gonna have to journal it. So once I get it out there and know that it is what it was, and leave it and everything, I think is gonna be fine because the creator, the higher power got me as I release some of those. That's one of them.
Hmm. I know what I shared is kind of heavy because I feel like the world is heavy. It's like, how do I even like, because I get this concept of like, what do you be in my light? Like people can be like, what the actual F does that mean? Right. I
Yeah.
don't know that I
Yeah.
can articulate it in the time that we have left in this episode, but I will say it goes back to getting to level of self acceptance. So you learn to start to feel like you can trust yourself because it's all about
Yes.
your capacity that you have to hold your own self up. And if you can hold your own self up, then you can shine your light and then you can start to be with the darkness, because what you start to realize, kind of leaning into what Warrioress Ardeshir said, you you realize that there's nothing to be afraid of in the dark. Sorry about that. There's nothing to be afraid of in the dark. The dark is where we're meant to exist. And there's been, I don't want to blow people's mind here, so I'm going to keep it very basic and not lean into the craziness of the world as I have been shown. But just how can you find the love within your own self? And if you struggle with finding that, accepting yourself, loving on yourself, start there. All the outside stuff, like, no, let that be and work on yourself. Work on yourself, be on yourself, look at what's going on in your community, look what's going on in your own household. A lot of people aren't even aware of what's going on in their own household. Start there.
Yeah.
Start there, and then the ripple effect comes from that. So start with being with yourself, loving yourself, being with in devotion, because one of the things that I'm focusing on this year is being in devotion with my body and what that looks like, and honoring the sacredness and the divinity of the body and how it's expressed, and like the essence that exists within that. So leaning in that way can help to build your strength and your fortitude to go into some of these really dark spaces, because there's some really dark spaces in this world. I can't not be honest about that. But start where you comfortably can go. Start where you can comfortably go, and it starts with yourself. That would be my
Yeah.
recommendation. Start
Oh
there.
yeah, you have to. You do.
You only have yourself. Honestly, you're only responsible. Your responsibility is to yourself.
First and foremost. First and foremost. And we understand we love on people, and my mom, my grandma, all giving and serving others, and we dismiss ourselves in the process. It's just like I said, loving yourself. What is it? Loving yourself does not, what is it? Doesn't dismiss. It's okay to fill your cup in order, we have to say it again, in order to do what it is that you do to serve even your kids, mothers, fathers, parents. You have to take time out for yourself. You just definitely do. I think our parents had a little bit more time, depending on when you were born in this world. Contrary to the day, the push, the shove, the this, the getting the kids. I mean, I played one sport a season. We did some other things on our own and not 55 million ones at one time. It's just overwhelming. It's just too much for the child and even for you. But I said one of the things that I did to understand how I'm continuing to get in my light is that I had thought that I didn't take things personally, but I really did. And family and stuff, they can really kind of really do that. We can do that with each other. Let me say, we can do that with one another. But the light came is when I realized that some of the stuff that we try are not ours to receive. So that is standing in a more comfortable place, a more lightened place within yourself. So sometimes something's going on with somebody and they come off and you have to say, that ain't about me. It's not about me. So I had to transmute and understand that that was a part that I had to release because it wasn't a good feeling to receive and honor that as my own. No heat or judgment against anybody because I have my own. And, it's nice to have somebody say, hey, catch yourself, and understand that and have to catch that with my own self. The judgments and things. Judgment is another thing that's a shadow part is judging, because if you're judging, somebody said we all judge, just don't condemn. Either way, if we're doing that to ourselves, then we're definitely, doing it to others. So once you have come in to sit down and like my co-host has said, is to begin with yourself. But we have a problem. It's not easy. It's not easy. It's one of the hardest things, but it's the most freeing thing.
Do you think it's that? But do you really believe it's as hard as that, though? I think we make it harder than it really truly is, because that's just my take.
It shouldn't be. Yeah, you got a point, but it feels that way.
You're right.
It
right.
feels that way.
Yeah. And feelings are not facts. Okay. I always have to say feelings aren't facts. They're just whisperings of what your nervous system is kind of leaning into, is like, I'm not so sure about this. It's simply like, I'm not so sure about this. Yeah. I forgot to mention this. I wanted to say this, and then we'll say goodbye. So the poet Rumi, who I love this poet. Rumi reminds us that we don't shine by avoiding the dark, that we shine because we're willing to enter it. The scary places are where the light is needed the most. And light workers are not here to float above the world, but to stand inside it, especially where actions have become inverted, distorted, and carried out away from or even in defiance of God, source, the universe, the divine.
Mm-hmm.
And these are the places that resist the truth, not because light is absent, but because it threatens what the darkness depends on. And so the quote by Rumi that kind of had this message come forward is, the wound is the place where the light enters you. This is by Rumi. And so the wound is the personal or the collective, is the rupture where illusion can no longer hold. It's the opening where divine truth presses in. And to enter the darkness is not to become it. It is to allow God's light to move through you, what has been hidden, feared, or falsely justified. So those light workers, and I feel everyone is a light worker that chooses to align to God. You're a worker of light, right? The work that you're called to do is to be in your light. How you go about it is how you play out your purpose. I feel we all have the same purpose, and that is to be the light and the demonstration of the light and the love of God. So light workers are needed precisely here in the darkness. And hear this part. This is the most important part. Not to condemn, but to illuminate. Because it goes back to what you were saying about the judgment part of it. Y'all, the powers that be are trying to take out my light, but we don't need that. We need the illumination. So with that, thank you all for watching. For those of you listening to the podcast, thank you so much. We're gonna say goodbye because I think we've gone over the time. I don't know how long it's been at this time. I stopped my timer. But those of you who are watching, be sure to subscribe to the channel and to engage in a way that feels aligned and empowering and purposeful for you. So you can comment, you can share, and we hope to see you in the next episode. Do you have anything you want to add?
Well, not really. I was going to shout out to a friend of mine with this shirt I got going on here. Yeah.
So
I
no.
think we, huh?
So no, we're not shouting out the shirt.
Yeah, I am going to shout out the shirt. This shirt, Love Because Hate Hurts, is a part of the love movement out of one of the poetic partners I knew out of where I used to live in Nebraska area. So if you're interested, you can just go to www.thelovemovementstore.etsy.com. There's a lot of different things that she's done, and I have to get some more work. So I just wanted to give her a shout out at that website. And yeah.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. And we will see you hopefully in the next episode.
Yeah, much love, y'all. Peace.